Hey, welcome back everybody to the Sanctuary. I'm Professor C, and we're going to be talking about anatomy and physiology again. Specifically, I'm going to be starting the organic molecules, carbohydrates, first. Let's do it. Alright, last time we finished talking about inorganic molecules, like salts and acids and bases. But more importantly, way more importantly, is this discussion about organic molecules. So this one's going to be broken into 4 parts, and this is going to be the first of the 4. Just to remind us from previous lectures what organic means in a biology class. It doesn't mean good for you or natural. Organic in a biology class means that the substance we're talking about is a hydrocarbon. That is, it's made from both carbon and hydrogens. We played this game in previous lectures if you want to look back. Everything on the other side here, all the pictures that are shown on the right, those are all different ways of drawing hydrocarbons out, drawing organic molecules. We're not going to get into the specifics here, but one thing you can do, if you look at a corner like here or here, you can always expect there to be a carbon at the corner. So I see a corner and a corner and a corner and a corner. So unless it's filled with something like there, it's filled with nitrogen, expect there to be a carbon at the corner. These are unique to living systems. And most importantly, let's put a big star here. And let's never forget these, the 4 major classes of biomolecules. My guess is we've seen these before, but here it is again. Carbs, which is what this lecture will focus on. Lipids, or fats, oils. Proteins, and nucleic acids. So carbs, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. Okay, carbohydrates, carbs, as most people call them, and most people have heard of these before, so we won't have to give too many crazy examples because we have a lot of familiar ones already. So sugars and starches and so forth. That C word here is chitin, and we'll find that it's a structural sugar found in some cell walls of some critters out there. When you think of the function of a carbohydrate, your number one word that should pop into your head is energy, and then energy, 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 right? So a great source for cellular energy, especially glucose. We'll tell some stories later very specifically of how we can turn glucose into massive amounts of energy. If we do it right, we can turn one simple glucose into, well, depending on where you read it, right, somewhere about 38 ATPs. We've seen this ATP before. Sometimes I'll draw a flash around it to show that it's explosively powerful. But to take one glucose and turn it into 30-something ATP is pretty impressive. There are some structural examples of carbohydrates out there. Deoxyribose, ribose, and again this ose, I've seen it 3 times here on the slide now. Glucose, ribose, ose is the root word for sugar. So keep that in mind if you see a word in biology that has ose in it, it's referring to a sugar more than likely. Deoxyribose and ribose here, if you know what DNA and RNA are, the D stands for deoxyribose and the R stands for ribose. It's telling you in the name of those molecules which sugar makes up the backbones of those molecules. When you see a carbohydrate written in its chemical formula, it will always have a very, very specific ratio. For every carbon, it will have the same number of oxygens and double the number of hydrogens. So for example, if I have a C3, I know I have a carbohydrate that's got 3 carbons in it. Can I figure out the rest of the molecule? Of course I can. I know it's going to have the exact same number of oxygens and double the amount of hydrogens. That's how you would make a carb. It's always this way. It's always in the specified ratio. So do another one if you want. If there's a C4, I would have O4 because I know it's going to have the same number of oxygens and then double the number of hydrogens. C4H8O4 is also a carbohydrate. All right, let's look at the monomer. monomer. Remember, when we're talking about polymers and monomers, we need to get real specific when we talk about these 4 different classes of biomolecules: carbs and lipids, and nucleic acids and proteins. So for a carbohydrate, the monomer is a monosaccharide. Literally means single sugar. So the building block of a carbohydrate is a single sugar. We usually give them a name by putting some sort of number prefix with "-ose" as a suffix. So we've already seen "-ose" meaning sugar. So by example here, our most important ones that we'll see are a pentose and a hexose. So look carefully here. A pentose. Pentose, I know when you read it you may think it means 5 sugar, but a pentose is just a sugar with 5 pent carbons. A 5 carbon monosaccharide. Now if I were to write out the formula, remember it's C5, I have the exact same number of O's, O5, and I have double the hydrogens, H10. So there's the structural, the chemical formula for a pentose, C5, H10O5. The 2 we're going to care about are the 2 we just saw, deoxyribose and ribose. They only have 5 carbons. And if you look at them here, you see pentose, ribose, and deoxyribose. Remember, count the corners if you want to count the carbons. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. There's not one here because there's an oxygen in that place, but there it is right there hiding. There's 5 carbon monosaccharide. Look next door to it, same game. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 carbons. There's a pentose. That's deoxyribose. Now let's check out some hexoses. Again, hex referring to 6. So the 3 hexoses you usually see on nearly every standardized test are glucose, fructose, and galactose. And I know fructose, just look at it, it looks like a pentose, doesn't it? It looks like a pentagon. I mean, this guy here definitely looks like a hexose. That guy there definitely looks like a hexose. But let's just count the carbons. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, it is indeed a hexose. It just has a pentagonal shape. So the 3 that we need to learn are glucose, fructose, and galactose. And that's a straight up type of memorization game. You just have to commit those terms to memory. So these are the 5 that I always recommend my students to learn when they're learning their monosaccharides. Well, what happens, you say, when you start stringing these monomers together? Well, let's look at the next slide and that'll tell us. Okay, if you take 2 sugars, disaccharide, now it's more than just 2 sugars. Remember, it's 2 monosaccharides. Is what a disaccharide is. 2 monosaccharides linked with a special type of bond called a glycosidic bond. There are a lot of varieties of glycosidic bonds. I'm just going to call them generically glycosidic bonds. I'm going to circle them now in the figures. Look over at the figures. There's one. There's one. There's one. They all kind of look a little bit different because they are, but those are all glycosidic bonds. So we have 2 monosaccharides up here, and we see their names. We remember them. Glucose and fructose, that equals sucrose. And again, this is a flashcard event. These are things to straight up memorize in your mind. Flashcards are a great way to keep these straight. Galactose and glucose make up lactose, a disaccharide. And then 2 glucoses, 2 monosaccharides of glucose linked together by a glycosidic bond make maltose. Now you may be thinking in your mind, if C6H12O6, right? We need those to be equal and this one to be double. That's a carbohydrate. Wonderful. You might be thinking, wait a minute, if we double this up, we're going to get C12H24O12, right? Shouldn't that make sense if we're going to have 2 C6H12O6s? Well, no, because remember, when we take 2 things and we link them together and form a bond, what do we have to do to make that happen? We have to pull water out of the system. Check the previous lecture if you need some help with that. But one water will disappear, so this will go to 11 and this will turn into 22. So that's why it's written as C12H22O11. Again, put these to memory somehow. Glucose and fructose is sucrose. glucose and galactose is lactose, and glucose is maltose. Remember, all of these are monosaccharide. Take two of them together and you get disaccharides. Right, polysaccharide, many, right? Many sugars, okay, many monosaccharides linked together. And that's all we'll say here. Long chain, sometimes they're branched, sometimes they're straight. Polymers of usually glucose, but some sort of monosaccharide is being repeated. You make these long fibrous threads of sugar. They're all going to be linked by the variety of glycosidic bonds. The classic examples that are on the exams are, first of all, plant starch. Plant starch is a perfect example of long chains of glucoses in a polysaccharide. And that will give some energy storage to a plant. A plant doesn't have, organs like a person does, so it can't store things in its liver because it doesn't have a liver. So it creates a storage product called starch and stores its sugars that way. Glycogen is the second one in the picture, and it's often referred to as animal starch. And this is something that you would produce because obviously you're not a plant. And you would take this glycogen and you would store it in your liver and muscles. That's a way of keeping your blood sugar low. If you have too much floating glucose in your blood, you can chain it up and form glycogen, a polysaccharide. And you can take that glycogen, again, store it in the liver and muscle, and save it for a rainy day when you need it, and then bring it out later and catabolize it, break it apart. Cellulose is the third picture in the image to your left, and it is called fiber, plant fiber. If you've heard that term before, fiber in your diet, they're probably referring to cellulose. So cellulose is a structural polysaccharide that helps the grass stand up straight, gives some shape to the leaf so they don't just flop over. So it gives some structure and support to plants. Chitin, again, I put it on one of the previous slides. I see it here. Some of the walls of fungi, some of the walls of the crab, like you see up at the top right corner, and some insects, their exoskeletons are made of chitin, which is a very, very strong polysaccharide. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching that one. If you want, check out the other videos in the series, and I will see you for the next one. Bye-bye.